The ridiculous Soviet rescue vehicle that drove on two giant screws through Siberian swamps. Picture a machine that moves through frozen swamps by literally screwing itself through the earth. No wheels, no tracks, just two massive metal spirals spinning like corkscrews, churning through mud, snow, and water that would swallow any ordinary vehicle whole. The Soviet ZIL-2906 looked like something drawn by a child who had never seen a real vehicle. And yet for 3 decades, this absurd contraption saved lives in places where nothing else could reach. But there was a reason the Soviets kept its fatal weakness classified for years, a flaw so dangerous that rescue crews sometimes refused to board it. The story begins not with triumph, but with tragedy. April 12, 1961. Yuri Gagarin returns from space, the first human to orbit Earth. His Vostok 1 capsule screams back through the atmosphere and lands exactly where Soviet planners predicted, except predictions mean nothing when your landing zone is Siberia. Endless forests, bottomless marshes, frozen tundra that becomes liquid mud for half the year. Terrain so hostile that helicopters cannot land and trucks sink before they travel 100 meters. Gagarin was lucky. He landed on solid ground. But Soviet space engineers understood luck is not a rescue plan. Within months, the Kremlin issued a classified directive to ZIL, the Zavod imeni Likhachova automotive plant. The mission was simple to state, impossible to execute. Build a vehicle that can reach a cosmonaut anywhere in the Soviet Union, regardless of terrain. Swamp, snow, ice, mud. Nothing could stop it. Failure was unacceptable. The propaganda value of cosmonauts was immeasurable. Losing one as to exposure in a swamp while rescue teams watched helplessly from dry ground would be a national humiliation. Engineers faced a problem that defied conventional solutions. Wheels sink. Tracks distribute weight better, but they too become useless in deep mud. Hovercraft cannot operate in forests. Helicopters cannot land when there is no solid ground. Every known form of transportation had a fatal limitation. Then someone remembered the Armstead snow motor. Back in 1926, an American inventor had built a vehicle that moved on giant screws. Rotating cylinders wrapped in helical flanges, like enormous wood screws laid on their sides. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of pushing against the ground, the screws pulled the vehicle forward by threading through whatever material surrounded them. Snow, mud, water, it did not matter. The luoxuan, the screw, would bite into anything. The Armstead machine had failed commercially. It was slow, ungainly, and impractical for normal use. But Soviet cosmonauts were not normal use. ZIL assigned the project to a specialized team under chief designer Vitaly Grachev. Their prototype, designated ZIL-2906, emerged in 1972. What they built looked like a fever dream. Imagine a bright orange capsule, shaped like a stubby torpedo, suspended between two gigantic metal screws. Each screw measured 3.2 meters long and 1.6 meters in diameter. The spirals were not solid metal but skeletal frameworks. Curved blades wrapped around a central axle, creating a cage-like structure. When they rotated, they looked like DNA helixes spinning in opposite directions. The passenger compartment held a crew of 2 plus a pilot, sealed inside fiberglass walls. Total weight, 2,100 kilograms. The power came from a ZIL engine producing 78 horsepower, enough to spin those massive screws at 43 rotations per minute in snow, slower in denser materials. Before we go on, if forgotten and impossible, war machines fascinate you, subscribe to Forgotten War Relics, and hit the bell so you never miss one. The physics were genuinely strange. Unlike wheels or tracks, the screws generated forward motion by threading through their environment like a bolt turning through a nut. In water, the vehicle floated. The hollow screws provided buoyancy and propelled itself forward at 10 kilometers per hour, the spirals acting as paddle wheels. On snow, it could reach 15 kilometers per hour. In mud, progress slowed to a crawl, sometimes just 4 or 5 kilometers per hour, but it moved. It always moved, and it could climb. The screws could grip slopes of up to 30 degrees, pulling the vehicle up inclines that would stop a tank. Soviet state media revealed the ZIL-2906 to the public in 1975, presenting it as another triumph of Soviet engineering. Cosmonauts posed next to the orange machine. Footage showed it churning through snowfields, crossing rivers, disappearing into mud that reached halfway up the screws. The propaganda message was clear. Soviet technology could conquer nature itself. What they did not show was the screaming. Production remained limited. ZIL built approximately 20 units between 1972 and 1991. Each one was assigned to specialized rescue teams that supported the Soviet space program. The machines were deployed to recovery zones across the USSR, from Kazakhstan, where Soyuz capsules typically landed, to the far northern regions where emergency landings might occur. They became part of a dedicated rescue ecosystem. When a capsule came down, the first responders were helicopters. But if the helicopters could not reach the site, if the ground was too soft or the weather too severe, the call went out for the screw vehicles. The ZIL-2906 would arrive, bright orange against white snow or dark mud, its screws already spinning, and then the real test would begin. The first true emergency deployment came in March 1976. A Soyuz descent module came down 200 kilometers off target, landing in marshland near the Ural Mountains. Spring thaw had turned the ground into a soup of mud and standing water. Helicopters circled but could not land. Ground vehicles sank to their axles within meters. The ZIL-2906 drove in. For 11 hours, it crawled through terrain that should have been impassable. The crew inside reported the journey as psychological torture. The constant rotation created a corkscrew motion. The cabin swayed, pitched, rolled. Everything not bolted down became a projectile. One crew member vomited 7 times. Another developed temporary hearing damage from the mechanical shriek of the screws grinding through frozen earth. But they reached the cosmonauts. The rescue succeeded. Soviet records document at least 14 confirmed rescue operations involving screw-drive vehicles between 1976 and 1989. Not all were space-related. 3 deployments supported geological survey teams stranded in Siberian wetlands. 2 rescued military personnel from failed Arctic exercises. 1 involved a downed helicopter crew in Kazakhstan. The success rate was 100%. Every mission reached its target. But success came at a price nobody anticipated. The psychological toll on crews became severe. Rescue operators began refusing assignments. Medical examinations revealed patterns, equilibrium disorders, chronic nausea, stress-related conditions. One crew member described the experience as being inside a washing machine filled with hammers. The noise was measured at over 100 decibels inside the cabin, even with insulation. Longer missions resulted in temporary deafness. Maintenance proved nightmarish. The screws, despite their robust appearance, required constant attention. Each thread acted as a scoop, collecting debris, stones, ice. Foreign objects jammed between threads could crack welds or bend entire sections. After particularly difficult missions, crews reported spending 3 days cleaning and repairing for every 1 day of operation. The transmission system broke down frequently. Parts wore out at accelerated rates due to the extreme mechanical stresses. Replacement components were specialized, expensive, difficult to manufacture. By the mid-1980s, keeping the small fleet operational consumed resources out of proportion to their deployment frequency. Then came the political collapse. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, the space program fractured. Budgets evaporated. The elaborate rescue infrastructure supporting cosmonaut recovery operations fell apart. Helicopter technology had advanced significantly. Modern aircraft could operate in weather conditions that would have grounded earlier models. The specific combination of circumstances that made screw-drive vehicles necessary became increasingly rare. Production of the ZIL-2906 ceased. The existing vehicles were mothballed, scattered across former Soviet territories. Some ended up in museums. Others were abandoned at remote rescue stations, left to rust in the environments they once conquered. A handful survived in operational condition. The Russian Space Agency maintains at least 2 units kept ready for extreme contingencies. They are rarely deployed. The last confirmed use was in 2003, supporting a recovery operation in northern Kazakhstan when unexpected flooding made traditional access impossible. The vehicle worked. It reached the landing site. But the crew emerged looking like survivors of a shipwreck, disoriented and sick. Engineers occasionally propose revivals. Modern materials could reduce weight. Better insulation might address the noise problem. Computer-controlled systems could smooth the motion. But the fundamental concept remains unchanged, rotating screws propelling a vehicle through hostile terrain. The physics that made crews suffer cannot be engineered away. The ZIL-2906 represents a peculiar category of military engineering, the successful failure. It accomplished everything it was designed to do. It saved lives. It went where nothing else could go. Every technical specification was met or exceeded. And yet it failed, because nobody accounted for the human element. The machine was perfect. The people inside were not. Today, the few surviving examples sit in museums or storage facilities, monuments to an era when engineering ambition sometimes forgot to consider the cost of victory. Their bright orange paint fades in the sun. Their screws no longer turn. But somewhere in Russia, 2 units remain fueled and ready, waiting for the call that might never come, prepared to churn through hell itself one more time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to Forgotten War Relics for more of the strangest machines history forgot.